when we talk about the overall female metabolism, you're never going to go wrong with getting more muscle. And when you talk about lean muscle, there's a lot of times where I will tell people, like, actually right now, stop trying to just lose weight. Try to gain half a pound to maybe a pound of lean muscle a month. If you're in perimenopause or menopause, it's quarter pound to a half a pound of lean muscle a month that you can typically add. That's what's really going to set yourself up for success.
Welcome back, you guys, to another episode of the Beyond the Scale podcast. I'm your host, Mary Katherine, and today I have a very special guest. I have Dr. Beth Westie, who is a chiropractic physician, an author, a speaker, a women's health and nutrition expert, and founder of Eat for Your Cycle and Nutrition for Your Hormones. So Dr. Beth is the author of the best-selling book, The Female Fat Solution, the 12-week female hormone solution, the Eat for Your Cycle method, and the host of the Female Health Solution podcast. She has made it her mission to change the way women view their health. Working to educate and empower women to take their health into their own hands, she uses nutrition to help women work with their natural cycle of their bodies to achieve lasting weight loss results. So welcome, Beth, to the podcast.
Yay. Thank you. I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited to dive into everything related to her hormones today. But before we do that, can you share your personal journey with ovarian cyst and how it led you to explore Eastern medicine and nutrition for hormone health?
Yeah. Yes. So this is a little bit of a story, but I'll condense it a bit. So, I was an athlete growing up. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, played volleyball in college, and then moved back to Minnesota to go to grad school. So if you hear my Minnesota accent, that's why. And I started grad school, and I actually had my first 2 kids while I was in grad school. And I was just, very stressful, busy life, all the things. Graduated, started my own practice in clinic. And then I actually, 2 months later, found out I was pregnant again. It's how life goes sometimes, right? But my youngest was actually born almost 2 months early. So she was a preemie. And I had a new business, right? We hadn't even been open a year and we were not doing well in business. And so I was under a ton of stress, right? So I had a preemie, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a failing business. And I was just trying to keep everything, moving forward, trying to keep the sky from falling, right? And it was after she was born and I, recovered from her birth because it was a placental abruption. So kind of a traumatic experience as well. I never had cysts before in my life, right? Again, being an athlete, always on the go, always being strong and healthy and all these things, never had any hormonal issues before. All of a sudden, I started getting cysts. I got my cycle back right away I always did after my kids, each of my kids. And with her though, I started getting cysts. Every month I would have a cyst that would burst. The first time it happened, I thought my appendix burst. Right. And if you've had a cyst that burst, it is so painful. It would put me on the floor, stabbing, searing pain would just drop me. And they the only recommendations I got were, oh, here's birth control, here's Vicodin, here's all this stuff. And I was like, I don't want to be doped up on Vicodin all day. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of other side effects from birth controls. I'm not a candidate for certain types. I can't get an IUD. I can't get other types of birth control. And so I was like, I'm stuck with very little option. And what I wanted was an answer as to why this was happening. I couldn't understand. I didn't have issues before. And now I'm having all these issues. What the heck? And the only answer I could get was your hormones are off balance. I'm like, well, okay, but how do I get them regulated again? And how can I really help this? So it wasn't until I dove into, because I'm licensed in acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and then started doing other work with female hormones and even fertility, in Chinese medicine. And that's where I started applying all that stuff to myself to say, okay, well, if I want to regulate my hormones, I need to do these certain things throughout the month. Each week of the month, your hormones are doing something different. And it's not a bad thing. It's how our bodies are meant to function it's just, it shifts and changes. So I started aligning what I was eating with what my body was doing. And it didn't happen overnight, but after a couple of months, I knew I had a cyst, but it didn't burst. And then I stopped having cysts after that. And my youngest is, well, she's now 14. But I haven't had a cyst since then. And I had them every month for a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So, I think first just have to mention, you had learned all of this, like the acupuncture and the, what is it? The Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The herbs and stuff.
And then you're like using it on yourself. Talk about that experience. Like how you couldn't give acupuncture to yourself. I'm sure someone else had to do it, right?
I mean, you can.
Wow.
It's not, right. Because most of it, like if I can reach it, I can needle it for myself. So there was some of that, but a lot of it was just like really figuring out what was going on in my body. And what I really dove into was listening to how my body was functioning and then aligning with that. I didn't want to use any type of outside source to just squash my hormones or wipe things out or anything like that. I wanted my body to function better. Yeah. And it takes more time for that to happen and everything, but it was, not a perfect system. Like there were times where I know sometimes it's the phrase, all gas, no brake.
Right.
Where at one point I was like, I'm going to do this with supplements. I'm going to take all these supplements. And I was taking, I'm not kidding, it was like a basket. I was taking like 35 different supplements a day, trying to do all, and I was like, this isn't sustainable. I can't keep doing this. And it wasn't working. So it wasn't until I really started aligning like my food, my nutrition and everything with my cycle that helped support my system to function the way that it should. Right. Because your body changes throughout the month. So,
right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. So everybody who's listening to this right now, you need to get out your paper and a pen because she's about to dump some major knowledge on me. This next question. All right. Can you explain to us the different phases? I mean, these are things we learned in like the 6th grade, but can you explain the different phases of a women's hormonal cycle and how they affect our overall health and well-being?
Yeah. So
just break it down, make it easy for us. Nothing too complicated.
Yeah. I always laugh at this because one of the most common questions I get anywhere, emails, anytime I do like a masterclass or something or social media, somebody sends me a DM or something. They're like, I feel dumb asking this question, but what's day 1 of my cycle? And I'm like, It's not a dumb question, right? 5th grade, 6th grade, we're all supposed to have that health class where we're supposed to learn about our bodies. It's not that informative, right? No. And then there's very little follow-up from there. And the only information we get told about our systems are, like what you see in movies or TV shows or read in, I don't know. Well, we used to read a lot of Cosmo, right? Like what they put in magazines and stuff. And it's not actual helpful information to understand your physiology. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the cycle, I'm going to go through like an average 28-day cycle. Yours can be a little longer or shorter, and that's normal. That's fine. Average 28-day cycle, day 14, midpoint is about when ovulation happens. So day 1 is the first day of your period. Like first day, full on bleed. Yes, right? Not spotting, not a little bit. It's usually a brighter red color, all of that. That's day 1. You can have your period for a day or two, and then it takes a break for a day and it disappears and then comes back. That still means that first day is still day 1. So during that time, your estrogen and progesterone levels are actually the lowest they are throughout the entire month. Testosterone is actually the hormone that would be the dominant one during those first 3-4 days of your period. So this is normal, like it should do this. Estrogen, progesterone are the lowest. This is when the things turn over, all that stuff. But then starting about day 5-ish, right? That's when estrogen starts to rise. And this is the follicular phase. Some people, I refer to it as the estrogen phase. Some people don't. It's hard to remember, follicular, luteal, those things. So estrogen phase here. And estrogen does some really important things in our system. It's going to help you with muscle repair and recovery. It helps you with memory and brain cognition. It helps you with energy. It burns carbs better, all these things. So you can do a harder workout. You can start a new habit. Just a lot of people are feeling their best selves during that phase, day 5 all the way up to like day 14-ish. Then right around that time frame, your ovulation should happen. And then estrogen starts to come down and progesterone pops up. Now you only produce progesterone if you ovulate. So that's why for a lot of like cycle regulation things, we really want your body to actually ovulate on its own.
Right.
Otherwise, you're not making that progesterone. And progesterone is the counterbalance for estrogen. Like when people say like, oh, I want to balance my hormones, the balance is having them ebb and flow throughout the month, not be the same every day, because that's not how our systems work.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So estrogen drops and progesterone takes over. And progesterone has a little different focus. It literally means like progestation. So it's like prepping your body for a viable pregnancy every single month, whether or not it's there. It doesn't care if it's not there. Your body's getting ready for it anyway.
Yeah.
It will slow down your digestive system a bit. So it's easier to get bloated, be more constipated, things like that. It will require you to need more rest, more sleep. So if you're feeling like, gosh, I'm not recovering from this workout as easy. Yeah, because you need more rest. You need more recovery time in between workout sets, in between heavy workouts. It takes longer for that muscle tissue repair to happen. And you need more actual sleep at night. And the system actually needs more nutrient at that point too. Just because the way the body uploads the nutrient, the female body needs more calories, more protein, more healthy fats and minerals during that day, like 15 through 28, when progesterone is elevated. So very different focus in the body. And one of them is not good or bad. It's just the body's focused on doing different things overall. And what a lot of people try to fight against is they feel a certain way at a certain point in their cycle. And they're like, this is me. I want to feel like this all month long, when you really live in like 4 different bodies, right? It's like when you have your period, then the estrogen, and then ovulation is a little bit different too. And then there's the progesterone. So having your period and ovulation are like short phases in there, whereas the other ones are like longer, like estrogen and progesterone are longer.
So a question I just thought of is, you said, so day, I think it's like 14 through 28, you typically, people see that they need more protein, they need more rest, more recovery. What if someone listening to this, and I'm asking actually for myself too, like I have a longer cycle. I always have. I have a 35 days, and it's always been like that. Does that mean that like technically my ovulation is probably, day 18 then? Like, is that how you, how do you know? I guess your body is it's changing during that time.
Yeah. So every cycle is different, and there's a couple of different ways to approach this. So typically what a lot of recommendations would be, so you said, what did you say? 36 days, 38 days? 36 days. 36 days. Okay. So if, like, instead of it being 14 days and 14 days, of like, okay, the first part is 14 days. The second part is 14 days. If we're splitting it up into 2 parts, yours would be 18 days and 18 days.
Okay.
But a lot of times what happens with the system is that your ovulation would not happen at day 14. It happens 2 weeks before your period starts. But if you're looking at the balance, that's still not balanced. If you, because that would allow your estrogen still to be present longer than the progesterone. So, So for some people, it depends on when you actually ovulate.
Yeah. What are some like common misconceptions that, women have about hormone cycles that you encounter? Because I know you said, you'll get questions all the time. Like, I know I should know this. And I feel like a lot of us are like that. And sometimes we feel embarrassed to ask. Like, I know if I go to, an annual OBGYN appointment, sometimes I'll ask questions and I'm like, oh, should I really ask that? Like deep down, you're like, I should know the answer I could probably answer my own question, but you just want that reassurance. What are some like common misconceptions that people have?
Yes. Yeah. So normal things that happen to your body. So again, I talk about it like you live in 4 different bodies throughout the month. There are so many things that are going to change with your body just because your hormones are changing and that is normal and that is fine. Like when you start like right before, like the day before, or even the first day of your period, it is very normal to have looser stool, to have diarrhea or something, because those hormones are really shifting over, right? It's going from progesterone to nothing, right? So your body wants to flush everything out as quickly as possible. And one of the ways it does that is through the gut. So it gets things moving. So sometimes people are like, yeah, I like have diarrhea right when my period starts. I'm like, yep, that's perfect. Your system is doing what it should. So make sure you're staying hydrated, because that can dehydrate you, right?
Oh, when the joys of being a woman.
Right? Yes. During ovulation, there's an increase in mucus production in your body. So you can become really heightened to smells. You can smell things easier. Certain senses might feel like they're heightened for you overall just because you're ovulating. Yep, that's totally normal.
Okay, I am so glad you just mentioned that, because I'm not going to lie, a few months ago, and if my husband's listening to this, he probably thinks I'm crazy, but I was like, I think I'm pregnant. And I definitely wasn't. But for some reason, everything I was smelling that month, it was like, I don't know what it was. It was like really heightened. And I thought to myself, oh goodness, am I pregnant? But I was not.
Yes. Yeah.
I always thought that was just something that happened in pregnancy. I didn't know.
Definitely, it does. Yeah, it does. But that's because of the mucus production is elevated and stays elevated overall during pregnancy. And when we talk about mucus production, it's everywhere in your body, including your nose, which is where your smell senses are. And the more lubricated your smelly senses are in your nose, the easier it is to smell stuff. Like if my husband takes his shoes off in the house and he's like laying on the couch over there, I'm like, oh my God, I can smell your feet all the way over here.
That's interesting.
Isn't that funny?
So does that mean that technically women have a greater sense of smell than men then all the time?
I mean, I don't know about all the time, but at certain times of the month, yes.
That's really funny.
Yeah. And that's really, it's some of those little things where it's almost like you feel like you're crazy for thinking, is this a normal thing? Like, what's happening to me? Is this a thing? I don't even know.
Yeah.
What? And then you doubt yourself and what you're experiencing, where it's like, oh no, actually that's exactly how it goes.
Yeah. So can you elaborate on the concept of eating for your cycle and like how you approached that?
Yeah. So, and this is something that, as I teach people how to do, like, just so you know, like I didn't invent this. This has been around for thousands of years and just used in a lot of different cultures in Eastern medicine. And if you Google it, you can Google this, the tone of food. You can Google what are warming foods and things will pop up. What are cooling foods and things will pop up. I even have, so on my website, I have a free download that you can get. It's Recipes for Your Cycle Cookbook, which will just tell you, oh, if you're on in the estrogen phase here, these are the cooling foods that you can eat. And if you're in progesterone, here's warming foods. And it gives you like an idea of where to start, right?
Yeah.
But it follows your even basal body temperature. So that's the biggest thing. When we're looking at regulating our hormones and having our system function better, we want to lean into those differences. Again, so often people talk about balancing hormones, and it makes you think of balance like a scale, and it's even, but that's not what a balance is. In the first 2 weeks, our basal body temperature should be a lot lower, right? So we want to lean into lower basal body temperature with everything cooling. So cooling foods, and not every food is going to be warming or cooling. There's like a whole category that's neutral as well. But cooling foods like chicken, turkey, fish, right? Raw fruits and veggies are very cooling, like cucumbers, very cooling, right? Cilantro, mint, rosemary, dill, like cooling seasonings even, right? They're very cooling for the system. Those are foods you want to have more during weeks 1 and 2, days 1 through 14. After ovulation, if your body's ovulating, your basal body temperature should spike and stay elevated. That is a big key factor that we look at in Eastern medicine for, is your body doing what it's supposed to do, tracking basal body temperature. We want it to elevate and stay elevated. So we want to match it with warming foods. Beef and bacon and venison and bison, very, very warming, right? Lots of rich, heavy nutrients in them too. our digestive system slowing down. So we want to cook foods more, have foods that are just broken down more, fruits and veggies broken down. Like if you eat a salad in your estrogen phase, when your temperature is cooler, salad's cooling, right? It can feel really different on your gut in the warming phase because your gut's not functioning quite at the same speed. So by heating up or just choosing different warmer foods and cooking them, physically heating them up, helps your system break it down and digest it better. And then spices and seasonings, hot sauce, peppers, cinnamon, ginger, cayenne, all that stuff, warming spices that you can add to stuff. So it's not about eliminating foods. It's not about being restrictive at all. It's taking foods that you already probably have in your kitchen and your pantry or whatever, and just shifting the tone of what you're eating to align with your body to help it stay on that pattern, especially when we're stressed or things happen in our lives. I mean, our hormones are impressionable, right? And everybody's had this where you're like, you get really stressed out and your period's late or you skip a period or something. It's the stress response in the body. That's normal. But if you're following kind of a pattern to say, oh, I'm going to eat this way to support this, warming and cooling, it gives your body this pattern to go off of overall.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
And something I just thought of is like sometimes when, like for me, I eat a lot of salads, and there have been times where I'll eat a salad and I'll feel fine. And then there'll be times where I'll eat a salad and I feel like I just ate a double cheeseburger. Like you'll get so bloated.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, why? I just ate a salad. Come on. I ate the good thing.
Yeah. It's healthy.
And it's probably because I ate a cooling food during when I needed to be eating a warming food.
Yeah. Yep. You're going to notice so much now.
Yes.
This is, it's just like the same thing. Again, like I said, I've been an athlete my whole life, and I compare it to, like, say you go for a run and you're like, oh, I love running this certain trail near my house, and you're in the estrogen phase, the cooling phase, right? This is where your muscle recovery is better. Every turnover is faster, all that stuff. And you're like, I'm going to go for a run. So you get up, you hydrate and eat something and stretch, and you do all the things, you do your routine, and you go for a run and you're like, this is great. I'm making great time. Woo. And you recover fast and you're like, I'm not sore at all. Woo. Well, 2 weeks later, you do the same thing, same route, same morning routine, same everything. And yet it can be a mile into that run. You're like, oh my gosh, my legs feel like cement today. What the heck? Oh, what's wrong with me? Nothing. You took a different body out for a run that day. That's it.
Yeah, this is so fascinating. So can you touch on that a little bit? So I've seen a lot on social media about exercise, not only nutrition for your cycle, but exercise as well. And how, for us at Fit Body Bootcamp, we do a lot of HIIT style workouts, but also we have some strength training or strength focused weeks. And then we'll have like metabolic conditioning weeks. Can you talk to us about like what you should be doing at those different phases of your cycle in terms of exercise?
Yeah. And a lot of this too, there are a lot of things out there. I love that you mentioned this, that talk about like, oh, if you're in this week, only do these exercises.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, right? You can, but I'm a firm believer in if you love some type of exercise, or movement is movement. So whatever that is for you. And also if you're training for something, if you're training for something, you're like, I have to put in this many number of miles this week. I can't have a light week just because I'm in week 3 of my cycle. What? So it becomes more about then making sure you're tuning in, adding more minerals, adding more nutrients before and after your workouts. And then really focused on recovery time. So for example, if you're doing a metabolic or weight training and you're like, okay, this is in the second part, the progesterone warming phase, where my muscle recovery isn't going to be as quick. My body just feels heavier. Just knowing that can be really helpful to say, oh, I don't, suck today at my workout. No, it's you brought your progesterone body to the gym that day. So it's okay if it's a little slower, or it's okay if you feel like you need a little bit more of a warm up or a little bit more of a cool down, or even between sets, even having 10 or 15 seconds more of a rest.
Yeah.
It can make a huge difference for your body's recovery phase and its performance throughout it. So one of the things that I have people tell me a lot with this when they're on like yep, I do this program or I do these things or I'm training for this thing. And even though I'm completing the same workout, just giving myself a little bit more of a break in between, they're able to finish out the workout stronger. Like instead of doing like, oh, I normally do 3 sets of, a breakdown set, 10, 8, 6, increasing in weight or whatever. They get to that set of 6 and they're like, I can't even finish it because they're so pooped out,
Right.
They're able to finish the 6. They're able to like just push through. Cause again, recognizing, oh, I need just a little bit extra there. And it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Cause I think too, so many women, like we blame it on something else, like we,
or being
like,
a wimp or something. And
like I didn't get enough sleep last night or, it's like, we're never really thinking about what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Like we're not blaming it on, oh, my body is different right now.
Yeah.
Like as you said, a different body is going out for that run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so interesting.
I even alter my pre and post workout supplements around my cycle too. This is like a whole nother level of it, but like I don't use creatine on a regular basis. I only use it during the progesterone phase to help my system because I know I've got my estrogen going to help me rebuild that muscles during weeks 1 and 2. So that's fine. I'm going to take it. Thank you, estrogen. Right. But progesterone is not quite the focus. So I do more creatine and branched chain amino acids in weeks 3 and 4 to help my system, rebuild that muscle faster. Yeah.
Interesting.
And again, little things just to help along the way.
Yeah. So something I just thought about. So, you're telling us how you can change your nutrition and also kind of like listen to your body more and your exercise, not necessarily change your routine or what you've been doing, but you're going to have to approach it differently at times. Do you believe that, and clearly you do because of your ovarian cyst that you've been able to reverse, like, can we avoid some of those, not necessarily physical symptoms of like fatigue and PMS, but more of like the mental and emotional side? Can we prevent some of that by doing some of these things? Because I know for me, there have been some months where leading up to my cycle, I feel great. And it actually happens. And I'm like, wow, I feel fine. But then there have been those months where I'm like, oh my goodness, can I just start my period already? I feel like I'm just dying inside. It's like some months are different. So by doing these things and like tapping into the nutrition piece and the exercise piece, can we avoid some of that?
Yeah. I mean, just knowing the information about how your system responds differently, like the meat suit you live in is different. It makes so much sense. And then you can understand more about why your system is doing what it's doing. So many women have mood swing issues and all that stuff and irritability, especially during week 3 and 4 of their cycle. And it's due to just a simple depletion. And your nervous system is really easily overwhelmed because you need more protein, more fats, more minerals, more nutrient, right? There, depending on what you look at out there, some resources even say 300 to even 500 calories more a day during that time.
Oh.
Yeah. So if you're not getting that, your system, can still function and do whatever, but your nervous system, it's just so much easier to get overwhelmed then. It's like you're a little frayed or raw. And so little things can like build up and it makes it harder for your system to regulate then. So that's one of the biggest things that I notice for a lot of people, that they just feel more even keel overall because you're getting your system what it needs. Oh, and getting more rest at that time too, which sounds like I'm supposed to eat a little bit more and rest more at that time.
Yeah.
Yup.
Now, what about for someone who's listening to this, who is, because a lot of our clients at the gym, they're either working on, there's 2 sides. They're working on strength training to gain more muscle, lose body fat, or they're really focused on weight loss. And of course, the muscle and the body fat, that'll come later, but they're working on that weight loss, the fat loss. What would you tell someone who's listening to this thinking, okay, well, I'm on a meal plan right now, or I'm on a a macro plan and I have to eat this many calories and these are my macros, but now you're saying I should increase my calories 300 to 500 calories in that week 4. How do they approach something like this?
Yeah, it can be, I'll be honest, mentally tough to do that. Because what you're told about nutrition and how that works, you got to keep in mind, like all that research is done on men.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do any of that research on the female body and what it really needs metabolically, overall.
Yeah.
So to really lean into that, it can be really, really, really tough. But when we talk about the overall female metabolism, you're never going to go wrong with getting more muscle. And when you talk about lean muscle, that is, again, besides your metabolism, it's great for your immune system. It's great for your brain health. It's great for your bone health, all that stuff.
Mm.
So there's a lot of times where I will tell people, like, actually right now, stop trying to just lose weight. Try to gain 3 pounds of lean muscle.
Yeah.
Because the female body, a half a pound to maybe a pound of lean muscle a month. That's the most. And again, it's just different because we don't have the levels of testosterone and everything else. And this is I'm talking about a gal who's not in perimenopause or menopause. If you're in perimenopause or menopause, it's 1/4 pound to a half a pound of lean muscle a month that you can typically add. And that's, strength training, getting all the protein and all that stuff too, right? Yeah. So that's what's really going to set yourself up for success. And there's a lot of women too who kill themselves at the gym doing like, I'm going to eat less and move more, which is, again, okay. But if you're older, again, entering perimenopause, and metabolically your system starts to change, your hormones start to change, and your body reacts to stress differently, your system will see that as a stressor and will actually just go into fat storage mode. The female body is designed to store fat easier naturally, right? Like that's why we have cellulite, that's why women have cellulite. It's how fat gets stored in our fascia and the male body doesn't. So again, I don't want to say like it's bad. It's just right. So it's just shifting focus and making sure, okay, are you working on your stress levels too? Or are you working on making sure that you are not, estrogen dominant or something like that to make sure that your system can function properly? Otherwise, what you're like, it's so tough to just outwork it. You can't outwork that,
That's so interesting. Okay, I want to talk about like more on a personal level. So tell us like what you eat every day, or not every day, but give us like like one every a week or a day of like an example of some of the foods that you eat for your cycle.
Okay. So people ask that. I know people do this a lot when they say like, oh, this is what I eat in a day. And people post it on social media.
Yeah.
I don't post that because I don't think you can't see it right now on a screen. I am 6'2". I am an Amazon of a human. I am like what I eat in a day is not the same.
Yeah.
Right? So when we talk about some of that stuff, an example of some things, again, because I have 3 kids, I'm married, I have 3 kids. And so the foods that we eat for warming and cooling, all that stuff, we eat together as a family, right? So how do I do that? In the morning, I will do a protein shake in the morning, and I have, it's a chocolate, plant-based protein powder. And to make it cooling, I'll do like mint, like peppermint oil in there, or peppermint extract, right? Great. Yeah. Getting my protein in, all that stuff in peppermint is delicious. And then for warming, it's the same thing, but instead of peppermint, I do cinnamon.
Okay.
Very easy to do that. Again, with kids, right? We have tacos for dinner a lot because I didn't want the cheese on top, Mom. I wanted it on the side. Okay.
Make your own taco. Make
it yourself, right? Yeah. Yes. So in the cooling phase, we'll do chicken tacos. And I'll use more cilantro, and I won't put hot sauce on it or anything like that, or spicy salsa or anything like that. In the warming phase, it's like venison. Well, my husband hunts. We have a lot of venison, but beef or something, a red meat. And then I will use all the spices on it as much as I can handle. So it's these kind of regular foods, but making sure I'm toning it differently. And then I do protein pacing throughout the day. Like I eat, making sure I get at least 20 grams of protein, 4 or 5 times a day, at least. I eat more than 20 grams usually at a time, but that's a good protein pacing place to start.
Okay.
for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, the cinnamon, the mint. I mean, this like really has me thinking. I have a little herb garden in our backyard and we have like cilantro and mint and
Yeah.
rosemary. Would rosemary be cooling or
Mm-hmm.
warming?
It's cooling. Yep.
Cooling. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just instantly like think, warm foods and cold foods, but I know it's not quite like that. But the chicken versus the beef and when to eat that, that's interesting. I've
Mm-hmm.
never thought about that before.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's not to say that you have to have beef every single day of
right.
the warming phase, right? Like you can still have, chicken tacos, but just make sure you're doing a lot of spices on it then. Or
Okay.
yeah. And what's so funny is every time I do a talk about this or share this information, I have so many people that are like, oh my gosh, I love eating spicy food right before I get my period. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, you do. That's your body telling you that it's trying to support that warming phase more. So
Oh, what would you tell someone who says like I crave chocolate right before I start my period? Because every woman says that. I mean, myself included.
yep.
I mean, I say like I tell my clients like go for it, eat the
Oh
chocolate,
yeah.
but what would your recommendation be?
Yeah, same. Eat the chocolate.
Okay.
Well, there's a couple of things about chocolate. One is that it's usually has good amounts of magnesium in it, which is a mineral, which
Mhm.
goes along with having more minerals. And
Mhm.
then there's usually, I mean, I don't care about the sugar content of stuff really like that, but the healthier fats in it. Again, if you're getting like a good dark chocolate, you're
Right.
getting
Right.
minerals and a little more fat in, which is perfect. It's exactly what your system needs at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for people who have like harsh cravings, especially leading up to their period, they're like, I can't stop myself from eating. I need to eat like a full bag of chips. Oh, I'm just like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, the salt, your body needs it. Like just start adding more fats and minerals, especially in the morning. It will change your cravings. Like do a fat bomb and put minerals in your water in the morning. Oh, it will completely change your cravings
Yeah.
during that time.
That's amazing. I recently started drinking my Element in the morning, my
Yeah.
Element tea, the little packets,
Yes.
because I read somewhere that most of the time, like when we wake up, we're very dehydrated. So it's great to drink it in the morning.
Yeah.
But I have noticed that like there will be some nights where I will crave something. And now that I think about it, I guess it is kind of like at the end of my cycle, it's close to my period. I will have like a second one and I'll have like the chocolate one at night, like a warm one. And it's so good. And it always helps me with my cravings.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah. Isn't that funny? Where
Yeah.
you're like, oh my gosh, I guess I sort of do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
I feel like I'm about to take my nutrition and my cycle to a whole new level. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. It's fun to kind of do an experiment.
Yeah.
And the only thing I will say about all of this stuff with starting to really lean into this, or if you start to add in seed cycling and all that stuff, keep in mind that you have to give your system enough time to really integrate this overall.
Okay.
That's the one thing that sometimes people, I'll say, give up too soon.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to change in a week. It's not even going to change in the first month necessarily, because each week, right, you're living in a different body. Let
Right.
that happen 3 times. So I always tell people at least 2, but 3 months is best to implement some
Okay.
change to see the full result for your system. And this is the same thing too, jumping back to the weight loss piece of it, where I talk about, okay, you live in a bit different body now than you did 2 weeks ago. So if you step on the scale or if you take a measurement or something like that, don't compare yourself to you 2 weeks ago. That was a different body hormonally. Compare yourself to last month
Yeah.
at that time. Makes a huge
Oh,
difference
that's
in how you analyze
yeah.
your progress, because you can weigh more throughout the month because your uterus, if you have an active cycle, your uterus doubles in size, it holds blood volume in there, and then your overall blood volume actually increases throughout the month and changes. So if you want
That's
to measure yourself at your skinniest, it would be like right when your period ends.
Yeah, that's fascinating and gives us something to think about in terms of like, with our clients at the gym, because a lot of times we'll have somebody new and they'll do like their measurements and they'll take their
Yeah.
weight right at the beginning and then they'll say, okay, like I want to do it every week. And that sometimes is not good because, yeah, of course you can see changes from week to week, but then sometimes they hit like that plateau or maybe they gain a pound or two and it's usually around their cycle. But I really like doing just like the monthly approach at the same time.
Yes.
I could totally see where that would help them not only physically, but mentally, because they would likely see the changes every month versus every week.
Yes. Yep. Every month. And it's hard for people to wait a whole month.
Oh, sure.
And there are, mindset wise, the hardest time I have with working with gals is when they are used to weighing themselves every day.
Oh.
And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm up, 0.35 pounds from where I was yesterday. I'm like, okay. Like,
yeah, I'm not worried about that.
That could be like a big poop that you have to take. That's fine.
Yeah.
You're fine. Like it's really like that long, giving it enough time, like just start the warming and cooling, start really listening, leaning into what your system is telling you. And it's incredible where you will be at in just a few months. But again, it doesn't happen overnight. So
yeah. Well, this is great. I have loved all of this information. I guess one last question for you would be, what advice would you give to someone who's just feeling overwhelmed by all of the information and wants to start taking control of their health?
Yeah. So the couple of things that I think are really helpful is one, to just start tracking. Write it down. Just write it down or put it in an app on your phone or something. Record that data and information because it can be really hard to remember exactly when you felt, like if you're like, I think I get migraines around my period. You remember that if you're like, oh yeah, I got a migraine and then I got my period the next day. And that happens month after month after month. But if you're not sure, like just start recording and writing that stuff down. Because as a practitioner going through this stuff with people, the more data they have, the easier it is for me to kind of piece things apart and say, okay, yep, this is what your system is most likely doing based on how you're feeling. And then just start somewhere. Right? Just even if you're like, I don't know that I can do all my meals warming and cooling, that's okay. Start with your breakfast.
Yeah.
Start with just trying to tone a warmer, cooler bit of your breakfast. That's great. And again, there are a lot of foods that are neutral too. So it's fine if you are like, shoot, I had a warming meal and I'm not in that phase. That's okay. It doesn't ruin things overall. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you have a 12-week program in which that can help someone start doing this. And you talk about all of the warming and cooling foods, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So the 12-week program I actually built for the female body. And because that's a full hormonal cycle from creation to completion. It takes 12 weeks, 3 months. And so it takes you through protein pacing, eating for your cycle. We do some different carb cycling stuff in there and some different fasting patterns for the female body. So it's not a regular fasting pattern, but it just kind of helps play with your metabolism to reteach your body for a lot of gals, how to burn carbs and how to use your nutrients different while also getting in touch with that different shift and change throughout the month. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Beth, this has been so great. I know you have the 12-week program, but where can people find you, follow you, and learn more about you?
Yeah. I'm on the interwebs. I am on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and TikTok, just Dr. Beth Westie. And then, my podcast is called The Female Health Solution, which you are going to be a guest on coming up soon too.
Well, thank you so much. This was so great. And I know our listeners are going to get so much value out of this episode. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in for another episode of the podcast. Make sure to check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and share this episode with all of your friends.